The morning greeted me with a gloomy sky and drizzling rain as I made my way through the crowded parking lot to the gray building that housed the Starline Logistics office. My shoes squelched in the puddles, and my old jacket, which I hadn't changed in 4 years, was soaked through on my shoulders. Tuesday was a day when nothing ever happened. Too far from Monday to be the beginning, too far from Friday to be the end. Just another faceless day in my faceless life. "Good morning, Millicent," nodded Tom, the security guard, the only person who ever acknowledged my presence. "Good morning, Tom." I forced a smile, even though everything inside me was tightening at the thought of the day ahead. The logistics department greeted me with the familiar hum of computers and the smell of cheap coffee. I walked over to my desk, a small island in the corner, squeezed between a photocopier and the wall. "Millie, the reports for the South are due at 10 a.m. on Breyer's desk," my boss, Thelma, said as she walked past, without even looking at me. In her 45 years, she had mastered the art of talking to people without looking them in the eye. "Already on it," I replied to the void, because Thelma had already disappeared through the door of her office. I turned on my computer and immersed myself in a world of numbers, tables, and calculations. Monitoring truck mileage is my official job. Sitting and analyzing kiloliters of fuel consumed, comparing odometer readings, and compiling expense reports. It's not that I hated it. Numbers always spoke to me in a language only the two of us understood. But the company's mileage tracking system was so outdated and inefficient that it made me want to scream. At 12:30 p.m., as usual, I grabbed my salad container and went to eat lunch on the fire escape. The acrid smell of cigarettes had long since permeated the concrete walls, but there were never any people here, which made up for all the other shortcomings. I opened a spreadsheet on my personal laptop, the very one I had been working on for 8 months, my secret, my brainchild, an algorithm that could save Starline millions if someone bothered to listen to Little Millie from the analytics department. I looked over the formula again, which automatically assigned routes based on weather conditions, traffic, and the average fuel consumption of a particular driver. The system could recalculate the optimal routes in real time, reducing costs and delivery times. Taking another sip of coffee from my thermos, I returned to my memories of 10 years ago. I was 12 and had just won first place in the district math competition. The school principal shook my hand personally and told me I had a bright future ahead of me. I sat on stage and scanned the crowd of parents looking for my tall father with his perpetually tired face and my mother with her trademark smile that never reached her eyes. But they weren't there. That day, Graham, my younger brother, was playing in a football game on the other side of town. "You see, Millie," my mother said to me later when I showed her the certificate, "it was Graham's big game of the season. We couldn't miss it." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. It wasn't the first victory no one had seen, and even then, I was beginning to realize it wouldn't be the last. At 14, I won the regional programming competition. A college professor called my solution to an algorithmic problem genius. But that day, my older sister Judith was participating in a young poets competition. My parents sat in the front row and applauded as she read poems about unhappy love that no one remembered afterwards. "I'm sorry, dear," my father said. "You know Judith is so sensitive. She needs support. I don't need it. I've always been strong, independent, invisible." The phone rang, pulling me out of my memories. I looked at the screen and cursed under my breath. My mother, just when I was almost done testing the new version of my algorithm. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Millicent, you haven't forgotten about Christmas dinner this Sunday, have you?" My mother spoke in the tone one uses with small children and very old people. "No, Mom, I remember." "Great! Judith is bringing her new boyfriend. He works at a bank, can you imagine? And Graham got a promotion at his firm. 21 years old and already a manager." Her voice sparkled with pride. I looked at my laptop, where the cursor was flashing on the screen above a line of code that could turn the entire logistics industry upside down. "I've achieved something too," I said, knowing that the phrase would be lost in the flow of my mother's monologue. "And please buy some wine on the way. The red one your father likes," she continued, not hearing me. "We want to get Graham a new phone and Judith a creative writing course, and you—" She paused. "Listen, what would you like for Christmas? I froze for a second. It was the first time in years she had asked me what I wanted. Maybe something was changing? I'd like some investment to get my project off the ground, I replied honestly, feeling my heart pound against my ribs. Project? My mother's voice sounded confused. What kind of project? I've developed an algorithm for optimization. Millie, are you still playing around with your computers? She interrupted with a sigh. I thought we were past that. You're 22 years old. It's time to think about a real career or at least a personal life. You earn peanuts, you rent that awful apartment, and you have no prospects. Maybe you should take some classes. Mom, I have to go. I cut her off, feeling the familiar heaviness return to my chest. Let's talk about this tonight. All right, dear, she replied with that special tone of disappointment she reserved especially for me. Don't forget the wine. I ended the call and buried my forehead in the cool brick wall. Just a moment of weakness before getting back to work. That evening, I was back in front of my laptop at home, in my tiny one-room apartment on the outskirts of Pomona. Half of the furniture had been left behind by previous tenants, the other half had been bought secondhand. But it was my place. No one looked at me with disappointment or compared me to my more successful brother and sister. I opened Skype and typed in Lark, the only person who knew about my project. Hey, genius. Her face appeared on the screen, framed by a mane of red curls. How's your revolution in logistics going? I've almost finished testing the new version, I replied, feeling the lump in my throat disappear as I spoke to her. The results are impressive, an average of 18% fuel savings and almost a quarter of the travel time. Damn, Millie, that's a breakthrough, she exclaimed. When are you going to show this to your boss? I shook my head. I'm not sure Starline will appreciate it. They're too conservative. Then other companies, Lark insisted. You can't just sit on this gold mine. I already sent a presentation to TransTech, I admitted. They're interested and scheduled a meeting for next week. No way! Lark jumped up in her chair. But that's a huge company. If they take your algorithm... There are still too many ifs, I said, trying to contain my excitement. But yes, if everything goes well, I'll finally be able to quit Starline. What will your family say? Lark asked, having witnessed my family drama throughout our friendship. I shrugged. They'll hardly notice. All they care about is what Judith and Graham are doing. Speaking of family, Lark changed the subject. Are you going to their Christmas dinner? Yes, I sighed. My mother called today to remind me. Apparently Judith is bringing her new banker boyfriend and Graham got a promotion. And you got a new algorithm that could change the world of logistics, Lark retorted. Why not tell them? I smiled bitterly. I tried today. My mother didn't even listen to me. To them, I'm still that weird girl who spends too much time on the computer. Their loss, Lark said firmly. One day they'll regret not seeing what I've seen. After talking to Lark, I felt a surge of energy and returned to work on the algorithm. I added another parameter, driver style based on historical data. Some drivers used more fuel because of sudden starts and frequent braking, while others drove more economically. My algorithm now took this into account as well. I grabbed a cup of tea and walked over to the window. The lights of Pomona spread out before me, and somewhere out there in an expensive neighborhood stood my parents' house, where my mother was probably discussing gifts for Judith and Graham with my father. I always receive something practical, a sweater, a bookstore gift card, a set of kitchen towels. Things that said, we don't know who you are, but here's something useful. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Don't forget the wine, and wear something nice, we're having guests. I didn't reply. My fingers returned to the keyboard, typing lines of code, creating an algorithm that no one in my family would ever understand. They hadn't seen me in years, but soon they might have to take a look. Wednesday morning greeted me with a headache and an email from TransTech confirming my meeting on Wednesday. I mentally went through my wardrobe, trying to find something suitable to wear to a presentation for potential investors. Nothing. I'd have to go to the store. On my way to work, I stopped at the supermarket and bought a bottle of wine that my father liked. Merlot, aged 8 years, $49. Expensive for me, but I knew my father would notice if I brought something cheaper. At the office, another fuel expense report was waiting for me, along with Thelma and her eternal "lunch is on Briar's table." I went through the motions while my mind was preoccupied with preparing for the meeting with TransTech. What would I say? How would I explain the potential of my algorithm to people who probably knew little about programming? How could I convince them that I, a 22-year-old girl with no formal IT education, had created something worthwhile? My phone rang again. This time it was an unfamiliar number. "Millicent Holt?" asked a male voice. "Yes, that's me." "My name is Edwin Tate. I'm from TransTech. We received your presentation and are very interested in your algorithm. Would it be possible to meet earlier than planned? Perhaps tomorrow?" My heart skipped a beat, then began to race. "Yes, of course," I replied, trying to maintain a professional tone. "I can come to your office after lunch." "Great," said Edwin. "I'll email you the details of the meeting. See you tomorrow, Miss Holt." I hung up and took a deep breath. It was happening. It was really happening. That evening, my mother called. "Millicent, did you remember the wine?" she asked without preamble. "Yes, Mom, I already bought it." "And wear that blue dress we gave you for your last birthday. At least it doesn't make you look like an office clerk." I took a silent breath and exhaled. "Okay, Mom. Listen, I have some news. I've been invited—" "Oh, by the way," she interrupted, "Judith has been offered to publish her poems in a literary magazine. Can you imagine? Our girl is going to be a famous poet." A familiar pain twisted my insides. It was the same old story. "Hey, congratulations," I managed to say. "Tell her I'm very proud of her." "I will. So what did you want to say?" I froze for a second. Was it worth trying again? Would she hear me this time? I'm taking a taxi on Sunday, so I'll be a little late." "Okay, dear. But don't be too late. We'll be waiting for you at 6. After ending the conversation, I stared at the ceiling of my apartment. They would be waiting for me at 6, but would they notice if I didn't show up at all? 4 in the morning is a strange time of day. Not night, but not yet morning. A time of ghosts and unspoken words. I sat in my small kitchen, lit only by the blue light of my laptop, finishing my 3rd cup of coffee. My eyes ached from fatigue, but my brain continued to work like a well-oiled machine. "Come on, one more time," I whispered, launching the test simulation. The red lines on the screen turned green, and the table on the right showed a 22% reduction in fuel costs. It was better than I had hoped. Much better. At 6:30, the alarm went off. I hadn't noticed that I had fallen asleep with my head on the keyboard. There was a mark on my cheek from the keys, a reminder of my secret nighttime work. The day promised to be an important one, a meeting with TransTech, a shower, a quick breakfast, a cup of coffee on the go. At the same time, I tried to iron the only decent blouse I had that would be suitable for a business meeting. On the way to work, I rehearsed my presentation, going over the key points. "Millicent," Thelma greeted me as I entered the office. "We have a critical situation with the southern route. Driver Parker has exceeded his fuel allowance again, and Breyers is demanding an explanation." I groaned inwardly. Parker was a problem driver. He always exceeded the fuel allowance, found the longest routes, and was systematically late. According to my calculations, if he were fired, the company would save about $40,000 a year on fuel alone. "I'll prepare a report," I replied. "But, Thelma, there is a solution to this problem. I've developed a system that—" "Just get the report done by noon," she interrupted, without even looking at me. "And I'll take your shift on the weekend. Is that okay with you? My daughter is performing in a dance competition." I wanted to say no. I wanted to say that I had a life too, that I had promised to attend a Christmas dinner with my family on Sunday. But the words stuck in my throat. "Sure," I managed to say. "No problem." In my cubicle, I opened 2 windows, one to work on the report for Breyers, the other to review the latest changes to my algorithm. If only Starline would give me a chance to show them what I could do. At 2 o'clock, I took a taxi to the TransTech office, located in a glass building in the business district of Pomona. I was shaking with excitement, but I forced myself to breathe deeply. "Miss Holt, I presume?" A tall man with a neatly trimmed beard approached me. "Edwin Tate. We spoke on the phone." He led me into a conference room where 3 people were already seated, 2 women and a man with an iPad in his hands. "This is Diana Chen, our technical director," Edwin said, introducing a woman of Asian appearance in a strict suit. "Lauren Phelps, our CFO, and Elliot Woods, our head of logistics." I said hello, feeling my mouth go dry. Edwin suggested I start the presentation. The first 5 minutes were the hardest. I tried to keep my voice from shaking as I explained the basic principles of my algorithm, but gradually I got into a rhythm, talking about what I really understood and loved. About route optimization based on multiple parameters, personalized driver profiles, and real-time monitoring. "If I understand correctly," Diana interrupted me, "your algorithm can reduce fuel costs by an average of 20% while also reducing delivery times?" 22%, according to the latest tests, I corrected, unable to hide the pride in my voice. "And yes, delivery times are reduced by about 15 to 18%, depending on the route." Diana glanced at her colleagues. "And you developed this on your own, without a team?" I nodded. "Everything was written from scratch." "Impressive," Elliot said, showing interest for the first time. "But how can we be sure it works in practice?" I was ready for this question. "I have test results based on real data," I said, opening the next slide, which showed performance graphs. "This data has been anonymized. There is no confidential information here, but you can see that when the algorithm is applied to routes that have already been traveled, the system shows significant optimization." For the next hour, I answered their questions, explained technical details, and demonstrated how the program worked on test data. With every passing minute, I could feel their interest growing. "Miss Holt," Lauren, the CFO, finally said, "we would like to conduct a pilot implementation of your system, let's say on one of our regional lines. If the results match your claims, we are ready to discuss full-scale implementation and, of course, compensation." My heart leapt into my throat. "Sounds great," I said, trying to sound professional, even though I was singing with joy inside. "When can we start?" "How about next week?" Edwin suggested. "We'll send you the test route data and you can set up the system." I nodded. "Sure, I'll be ready." After the meeting, I stepped outside, feeling light all over. My program, the algorithm I had written at night, hiding from the world, could become a reality. I was being taken seriously. I wasn't invisible. I called Lark. "They agreed!" I shouted into the phone as soon as she picked up. "Transtech agreed to a pilot project. I told you so!" Lark squealed in response. "God, Millie, that's amazing! Let's celebrate!" "Yes, definitely. But right now I have to get back to work." I glanced at my watch. "Thelma will kill me if I don't finish that Parker report." "That job will soon be a thing of the past," Lark said with confidence. "Trust me." Back at the office, I felt like a double agent. On the outside, I was still the same unremarkable Millicent Holt, a junior analyst. Inside, I was the inventor of an algorithm that could change the industry. That evening, Lark and I met at our favorite bar, a small place on the outskirts of town that was never very crowded. "To the future tech mogul!" Lark raised her glass. I laughed. "I'm a long way from being a magnate, but it really is the beginning of something big," Lark finished for me. "The beginning of something big. And you deserve it, Millie." I took a sip of wine, feeling warmth spread through me. Not just from the alcohol, but from the realization that someone saw me. Really saw me. Lark and I had met in school when we were both selected to participate in a math competition. Lark was bright and loud with a mane of red curls and boundless energy. I was quiet and focused. But somehow we found a common language. She was the only one who noticed when I disappeared into the shadows of my more prominent brother and sister. "Have you talked to your parents?" Lark asked, even though she already knew the answer. "I tried," I sighed. "But my mother was too busy talking about Judith's latest achievements." "Damn it, Millie," Lark shook her head. "You've created an algorithm that could revolutionize an entire industry and they still don't notice you?" I shrugged, trying to look indifferent. "I'm used to it. Besides, it makes my life easier. No expectations, no pressure." Lark looked at me with an expression I knew all too well, a mixture of pity and irritation. "Christmas dinner is this Sunday, right?" she asked. "Yes. The annual The Holt Family Tries Very Hard to Pretend I Don't Exist show." I tried to joke, but it came out bitter. "Maybe this time will be different," Lark suggested, though there was no confidence in her voice. Maybe you'll tell them about the contract with TransTech. Maybe. I took another sip, knowing that I would probably keep quiet. The next few days flew by in a feverish rush of work. During the day, I performed my duties at Starline, and at night I fine-tuned the program for the TransTech pilot project. Edwin sent me data on the regional route, and I adapted my algorithm to its specifics. Sometimes I fell asleep right at my computer, waking up with key prints on my cheek and a sore neck. But it was a good kind of pain, the pain of progress, of moving forward. On Saturday, I worked at Starline, filling in for Telma as promised. The office was empty, so I used the time to run a few more tests using the company computer. The system worked perfectly, and I saved the results to my flash drive. In the evening, Edwin called me. "Millicent, we've reviewed your preliminary calculations for the test route. It looks amazing, to be honest. Our analysts have checked the model and agree with your predictions." I felt my body fill with warmth. "Thank you, Edwin. I'm very glad you're pleased." "More than pleased," he replied. "In fact, we'd like to speed up the process. Would it be possible to meet on Monday to discuss not only the pilot project, but also long-term cooperation?" I gripped the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. "Yes, of course, I'll be there." "And Millicent," he paused, "we've discussed this with the board of directors. If the pilot project is successful, we're prepared to offer you a six-figure sum for licensing your technology, plus royalties from each implementation." I covered my mouth with my hand to keep from screaming with joy. That sounds very generous, Edwin." "We know the value of what you've created," he replied simply. "See you Monday, Millicent." After the call ended, I sat motionless for several seconds, unable to believe what had just happened. A six-figure sum, royalties. It felt like a dream, but I knew it was real. A reality I had created with my own hands, my own mind, my own sleepless nights. I called Lark. "You won't believe it," I began, but couldn't finish the sentence because tears were streaming down my face. They weren't tears of sadness, but tears of relief. I had been seen. My work had been recognized. My labor had value. "Millie?" Lark asked, concerned. "What's wrong?" Through my tears, I told her about Edwin's call, about the upcoming meeting, about the six-figure sum. "Damn it," she exclaimed. "I knew it. I always knew you were a genius, Millie. God, I'll be right over." 40 minutes later, we were sitting in my apartment, drinking a bottle of champagne that Lark had bought on the way over. "To you, to your brain, to your future," Lark raised her glass. "And to everyone who didn't believe in you. Let them bite their elbows." I smiled. I still can't believe it. It seems unreal." "But it's real," Lark said firmly. "And you deserve it. Every penny, every recognition. You worked for it." I nodded, feeling the warmth of the champagne and pride spreading through my body. "It's Christmas dinner tomorrow," I said after a pause. "I don't know if we should tell them." "Why not?" Lark shrugged. "Let them know that their failure of a daughter is about to be richer than all of them put together." "It's not about the money," I argued. "It's about the recognition. It's about my work mattering. But I'm not sure they'll understand." Lark took my hand. "Listen, Millie, I know your family. I know how they see you, or rather, how they don't see you. But this is your moment, your victory. And if you want to share it with them, do it. If not, that's the right decision too." I sighed. "You know what's ironic? Every year they give me useless gifts I never ask for. This year my mother even asked me what I wanted for the first time in years, and when I told her about investing in my project, she didn't even listen." "What are you going to give them this year?" Lark asked. I looked at her and suddenly realized that the answer was obvious. "Nothing," I said firmly. "This year I'm going to spend my money on myself. I need a new cloud server to scale my project. That will be my gift to myself." Lark smiled broadly. "That's my girl." She raised her glass. "To investing in yourself." The next morning, I woke up with a slight headache from the champagne, but with a clarity of mind I hadn't felt in a long time. I called the cloud server company and rented a package I couldn't afford before. Then I transferred the payment. My monthly rent went to the server that would allow my program to work with large amounts of data. That money was supposed to go toward gifts for my family. Another cologne for my father, which he never used. A scarf for my mother, which she would put in a drawer. A book for Judith that she would never read. A gadget for Graham that he didn't need. But not this time. This time, I chose myself. By evening, I started getting ready for Christmas dinner. I took the blue dress my mother insisted I wear out of the closet. It was too formal for a family dinner, too strict for my taste. But if it would make her happy... Although, who was I kidding? My mother was never completely satisfied with me, no matter what I did. I threw the dress on the bed and took out my favorite jeans and a white blouse. This was my day, my victory, and I was going to dress the way I wanted to. Grabbing the bottle of wine I had bought for my father, I left the apartment. The money I had planned to spend on gifts was already working for me, turning into computing power for my algorithm, for my future. As I headed for a taxi, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time, I was going to a family dinner not with a feeling of anxiety and inadequacy, but with confidence in my own worth. With the knowledge that even if they didn't see me, there were those who did, and most importantly, I saw myself. My parents' house was exactly as I remembered it, large, immaculately kept, with an air of luxury that the Holt family couldn't afford, but desperately tried to imitate. Christmas garlands wrapped around the porch railings, and warm lights flickered in the windows. I stood in front of the front door, clutching a bottle of wine, gathering my courage to ring the bell. It was the 23rd Christmas dinner of my life, and every one of them had left a bitter aftertaste of invisibility. But this time was different. I was different. Not the shy girl who desperately sought her family's approval, but a woman who had created something valuable with her own hands. I pressed the doorbell and heard a familiar melody inside the house. A few seconds later, the door swung open and my mother appeared on the threshold, Fallon Holt, with her perfect hairstyle and flawless makeup, dressed in a dark green dress that emphasized the Christmas spirit. "Millicent, dear," she exclaimed with a broad smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're 20 minutes late. We've already started the aperitif." "Hi, Mom," I said, handing her the bottle of wine. "Traffic was bad. Merry Christmas." She glanced at the bottle, studying the label. "Good choice. Your father will appreciate it. Come on in. Everyone's here." Everyone meant my father, A.I.K. Holt, a successful middle manager who had worked for the same company for 30 years and was proud of that loyalty more than anything else in his life. Judith, my older sister 26, a creative soul, as my mother called her. Graham, my younger brother, who had just turned 21 and had been the family favorite since birth. And obviously, Judith's new boyfriend, whom I had heard about from my mother. When I entered the living room, the conversation stopped instantly. 5 pairs of eyes turned to me, assessing my clothes, my hair, my entire appearance. I could almost physically feel their disappointment when they saw me in jeans instead of a proper dress. "Millie!" my father exclaimed, rising from his chair. "Finally! We thought you weren't coming." "Hi, Dad," I said, letting him hug me. He smelled of cologne and whiskey. "Merry Christmas. Meet Declan," Judith said, beaming with pride as she introduced her companion, a tall man with perfectly coiffed hair and an expensive suit. "He works at First National Bank." "Very nice to meet you," Declan nodded, extending his hand. "Judith has told me a lot about you." "I doubt it," I thought, but smiled politely. "Merry Christmas, sis," Graham muttered, without looking up from his phone screen. "Cool. Jeans." The sarcasm in his voice was almost palpable. "Thanks," I said, sitting down in the only empty spot, the corner of the sofa. "How are you? How's your promotion going, Graham?" It was the perfect question to launch the well-rehearsed Graham admiration program. My brother instantly looked up from his phone, and my mother and father sat up straight, ready to beam with pride. "Oh, that's amazing," Graham began, and for the next 15 minutes, I listened to a detailed account of how he had been promoted to junior sales manager at his electronics company, how his boss had personally noted his incredible potential, and how he had already exceeded his quarterly target by 30%. "At his age," my father added proudly, 21 years old and already such a career." "That's impressive," I agreed politely, though inside I wondered how impressive a starting position in sales with a fixed salary and dubious prospects really was. "And Judith has wonderful news too," my mother chimed in, shifting the spotlight to my sister. Tell Millicent about the magazine, dear. Judith fixed her hair with a gesture she had clearly rehearsed in front of the mirror. Literary Herald is going to publish a selection of my poems in their spring issue, she announced, with the same pride with which others might announce winning the Nobel Prize. The editor said my voice is fresh and authentic. Do you know how many copies that magazine prints? Asked Declan, clearly impressed. Judith put on a modest expression. About 7,000 copies, but it's read by key people in literary circles. Our girl is going to be a famous poet. Her mother squeezed Judith's hand with such adoration that I felt physically uncomfortable. Congratulations. I forced another smile. That's great. How's your job, Millicent? Her father asked, clearly out of politeness. Still at that logistics company? Yes, Starline. I nodded. But, oh, dinner's ready, my mother interrupted, getting up. Let's go to the dining room. Millicent, help me with the salads. In the kitchen, my mother carefully arranged the dishes on trays, commenting on her every move as if I were filming a training video. Judith has great prospects with this publication, she said, cutting the baguette into thin slices. And Declan is such a catch. Senior vice president of a bank at 30, can you imagine? I nodded silently, arranging the salad on plates. And Graham is climbing the career ladder so quickly, she continued. His boss said he could be a department head in a couple of years. At 23. That's incredible. Mom, I tried to interject. I also wanted to, she interrupted me again. I've been thinking about you. Maybe you should take some advanced training courses, something more promising than this. Analytics. My friend Doris knows a good career counselor. I took a deep breath, holding back my irritation. I have news about my job, I said insistently. I've developed a new system that— Take that tray to the dining room, please, my mother said, handing me a plate with an elaborate appetizer. And try not to spill the sauce on your jeans. Everyone was already seated in the dining room. As usual, I was seated at the far end of the table, between an empty chair and the wall, as far away from the center of attention as possible, where Judith sat with her banker boyfriend and Graham with his recent promotion. Dinner followed the familiar pattern. Graham talked about his plans for the future and how his company trusted him with serious projects. Judith read excerpts from her poetry, receiving enthusiastic praise from her parents and her boyfriend. Declan discussed investment opportunities with his father and bragged about his recent trip to Europe. I ate silently, occasionally inserting polite comments and feeling invisibility envelop me like a protective cocoon. But this time, inside the cocoon there was no emptiness or resentment, but my secret. My little empire that I had built myself without their approval or support. Millicent, Declan suddenly addressed me, obviously out of politeness. Judith said you work with numbers? Analytics, right? Yes, I'm a data analyst at a logistics company, I replied. But recently I've also developed— Oh, just as I was saying, my father interrupted. She's always been good at math, although she could have chosen something more prestigious. Banks need analysts too, right, Declan? Absolutely, Declan nodded. If you're interested, Millicent, I could find out about vacancies in our analytics department. Thanks, I smiled politely. But I have other plans. Dessert, my mother announced, rising from the table. And, of course, our favorite tradition, gift exchange. Boxes of various sizes wrapped in bright paper with bows were already laid out in the living room under the tree. My mother began to hand out the gifts. This is for AIK from me, she said, handing my father a large box. This is for Judith from me and Dad, she said, handing another box to Judith. For my little Graham, my brother received 3 packages at once. This is for Declan from us, my mother said with a smile, handing a small box to our guest. I sat watching this ritual and felt a strange calmness. I knew what was going to happen next, and I was ready. Oh! My mother clapped her hands dramatically, looking around at the empty space under the tree. Millicent, I think we forgot about you. She said it with feigned surprise that did little to hide the fact that it was intentional. Graham giggled, and my father coughed into his fist, clearly embarrassed. In years past, at this moment, I would have felt hot tears welling up in my eyes, resentment tightening my throat. I would have said, "It's okay," in a trembling voice, and then cried in the bathroom. But not today. I smiled, sincerely, calmly. "It's okay," I said. "Look what I bought myself." My mother laughed awkwardly. "Oh, sweetie, don't be upset. We just forgot to buy—" "We'll get you something later. What did you buy yourself? A new ring?" Judith gave me a searching look. "Or a handbag," she suggested with a slight sneer. "Although I don't see anything new on you." Graham was already opening his presents, completely uninterested in my answer. "An apartment," I said calmly. "I bought an apartment." The room fell silent. Graham froze with a half-unwrapped box in his hands. Judith snorted incredulously. My father furrowed his brow as if he hadn't heard. "Sorry, what?" my mother asked. "What apartment?" "A 2-bedroom in the new River Point complex," I said, pulling a folded piece of paper out of my bag. "Here's the purchase agreement. I made the down payment last week." My father took the paper and began to study it. His expression changed from disbelief to amazement. That's a lot of money, Millicent," he said finally. "Where did you get that kind of money? Did you take out a loan?" "No," I shook my head. "I paid for it myself." "But that's impossible," my mother objected. "Your salary at that logistics company—" "Starline isn't my only source of income," I interrupted. "For the past 2 years, I've been developing a program to optimize logistics routes, an algorithm that reduces fuel costs and delivery times." "A program?" Graham looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. "You write programs?" "Yes," I nodded. "And last week, TransTech agreed to buy a license to use my technology. A 6-figure sum plus royalties from each implementation." The room fell silent again. Declan, who had looked bored until then, suddenly became interested. "TransTech?" he asked. "The big transportation company?" "One of the largest on the West Coast," I confirmed. "They have over 3,000 vehicles in their fleet." "And they bought your program?" Judith asked incredulously. "For 6 figures. Technically, they're buying a license to use it," I clarified. "I retain the rights to the technology. And yes, the first payment was 6 figures. I used some of that money for the down payment on my apartment. Why didn't you ever tell us?" My mother looked confused and a little hurt, as if I had kept something important from her. I looked her straight in the eye. "I tried," I said, my voice remaining calm. "Many times, but you were always too busy with Judith and Graham to listen." "That's not entirely true," my father protested. "We've always been interested in your life." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Name one project I worked on. One achievement you noticed." My father opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. My mother nervously fixed her hair. "Millicent, that's a little unfair. We always supported you." "By forgetting me at Christmas dinners?" I asked quietly, but without malice. "By missing all my math competitions but never missing a single one of Graham's games? By always saying that my interest in computers was just a hobby that would never amount to anything?" "We didn't know you were so serious about it," my father defended himself. "You never said you were creating anything worthwhile." Those words cut deep, even though I was prepared for them. "I did," I replied quietly. "You just didn't listen." "So what now?" asked Judith, clearly confused by the fact that all attention had shifted to me. "Are you quitting Starline?" "Yes," I nodded. "After the New Year holidays. I'm going to focus entirely on developing my technology. I already have inquiries from other companies." "So you're rich?" Graham asked bluntly, finally looking at me with genuine interest. I smiled. "I'd say financially independent, and this is just the beginning." "And you kept all this a secret?" My mother shook her head. "From your own family." "Not a secret," I objected. "No one asked. Everyone was more interested in Judith's poetry and Graham's sales." "Well, those are important achievements," my mother defended. "And mine aren't?" I looked at her with genuine curiosity. "Of course they are," my father said hastily. "We just didn't understand." "Well, now you do," I said, standing up. "I have to go. Tomorrow is an important day. I have a meeting with investors from TransTech." "But you just got here," my mother exclaimed, "and we haven't finished exchanging gifts yet." I thought we were done, I said, pointing to the empty space under the tree. There's nothing for me. Millicent, please. My father looked genuinely upset. We didn't know. We could have. It's okay. I smiled, and for the first time in many years, it was a genuine light smile. Really, I'm not offended. I just finally realized that I don't need your approval to value myself and my work. I headed for the door, but stopped and turned around. Merry Christmas, everyone, I said. And Declan, it was nice to meet you. I walked out of the house, feeling the fresh night air fill my lungs. Behind me was a house frozen in shock, where my family was probably trying to make sense of what had just happened. Maybe they would understand. Maybe they wouldn't. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't matter. The stars were shining brightly in the Pomona night sky. I took out my phone and dialed Lark. So how did it go? She asked immediately. Fine, I replied, and it was true. I told them everything. And? Did they finally realize how amazing you are? I smiled. I'm not sure. But you know what? It doesn't matter anymore. I walked down the street, leaving behind the house where I had always been invisible. Ahead of me was a new apartment, a new life, my own empire that I had built without their support or approval. And most importantly, there was freedom ahead. Freedom from the need to be seen by those who didn't want to see me. Freedom to be myself, without apologies or excuses. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from my mother. Millicent, please come back, we need to talk. I read it and put my phone back in my pocket without responding. Maybe someday we'll talk, but not today. Today was my day, the day I finally became visible, to myself.